Okay, well, let's go ahead and dive in. We have about 70 plus people who have registered, and we've got about 55 on the call, and I think we have good staff waiting to help people on if they're having any issue. So we'll get started. First, greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this brave new world. While we had hoped to host you on our campus this year, this meeting helps us achieve at least one of MHS's goal, which is reaching you where you are and not making you come to us. You know, that's a big thing for us. So we're sort of scratching that itch. What surreal times we are living in, you know, at the moment, which is one of the themes that we'll talk quite a bit about today. Before we dive into the substance of the meeting, I want to do several things. First, I want to thank you all for your membership, interest, and participation in Maine Historical Society. It is vital to us in so many ways. It's the energy, you know, our conversations with you gives us energy. The membership supports our program and your giving, and just knowing that we're connecting with people and helping Maine along is really important to us. I also want to acknowledge that today is the 76th anniversary of D-Day. One way or another, that seems like an important frame of reference as we try to put the challenges of our current moment into historical perspective. So, you know, I think a lot of us are trying to grapple with where does this fit? What's our challenge like compared to others? And it's thought-provoking to think about those men on those beach that day. With that, I would like to introduce Jean Gulliver, who is the chair of the MHS Board of Trustees, and we were all very fortunate to have her tremendous leadership. So over to you, Jean.
So pleased to have people join us in these tumultuous times in a quiet and thoughtful way. I think we're all feeling a bit unmoored from what we think are the fixed points in the world. And that's why we all share the passion we do for history. And each of you brings different perspectives, different backgrounds, different perceptions of history, and yet we all adhere to the same context of a historical record, factual documents. As best as we can, Maine Historical, as you all know, works hard to share the resources we have, to continually collect and keep them current. And you probably have seen the statement that we put out this week. I hope that those of you who found it valuable will let us know, and those of you who have questions and other thoughts will also let us know, so that this is a dialogue that can be strengthened and expanded as we navigate this very changed world. We are in a bicentennial inflection point, since the state hasn't really been able to do as it planned and wished. And our MHS bicentennial comes up in 2020, which makes, in 2022, which makes the rest of 2020 and 2021 a bit unusual, and yet we see it to be a real opportunity. We have lots planned, whether it remains virtual or not. We're going to continue to fulfill our role to bring interest and context and programming to you. We are excited to open our bicentennial exhibit as soon as we are able to, but we will keep it in place until we are able to, and push off any other exhibits until that moment comes to us. So that's where we find ourselves. As Steve said, we're going to move through this respectful of the time that you have given us today. And we are next going to go to the meetings. You should see on your screen a very old record of some Maine Historical Society minutes. This year, rather than have open and verbal votes, we have moved that they be accepted. Tyler Judkins has moved that we accept, and Michael Chinchet has moved that he has seconded that. We sent the minutes out to you. We heard from no one with any corrections, changes, additions, deletions. So knowing that you have all had access to them, that they have been moved and seconded, I will move or deem that we accept these minutes for this and for the 197th annual meeting and move on in the agenda. And where we go, before we have our moment of remembrance, as I said, well, the moment of remembrance just flashed up. Every year we remember and pause to think about the friends and participants who are no longer with us. It's a remarkable list of people. And if we could just take 30 seconds, you should have that list up in front of you. Each of us knows some or all of these people, and will, rather than reading out the name again, given the situation we're in, we would ask you to look at that, to pause for 30 seconds, and then we'll continue the meeting. Thank you all for that moment. It is the friends of MHS, past, present, and future, that we work with, live with, laugh with, and value tremendously. So moving on from the moment of remembrance, we'll go back. Now we have, I'm going to pass along. You should have in front of you now the report of the Governance Committee. I hope everyone's seeing that. We have a wonderful slate of officers, of members. The re-election of Laura Sprague to the board, re-election for that's for a second term. For a third term, we have Tyler Judkins, Eileen Skinner, and Andy Versosa. And new members, Liz Johnson, Tom Platts, and Natalie Sottoloff. Just like to say that because of technology, we have been able to expand our board membership quite dramatically in the past few years, so that we do have more members who, some of whom don't even live in the state anymore because of job changes and opportunities. And we are using virtual meeting much more frequently and robustly. And we have been thrilled to be able to expand the membership the way we have, and value these people whose names you're looking at right now, and the other board members who come from around Maine and New England and bring so much talent to this board. Thank you. Okay, moving on from here. Carl, you're ready with the treasurer's report?
I am ready. I want to present the treasurer's report for today. In normal times, I would present a summary of the prior fiscal year and an update on the fiscal year in progress, look at some key financial items in a year-over-year comparison. However, these are not normal times. So instead, I'll spend some time summarizing where we are now and the steps that were underway to improve the society's financial situation before the pandemic turned almost everything inside out. For a few years, MHS has run at an operating deficit, meaning that our expenses have exceeded our revenues before taking into account items like depreciation and investment gains and losses. This came about in part due to reliance on governmental grants, which had supported us for a number of years, but weren't available to us after the beginning of 2018. Since then, MHS has operated with extremely tight staffing and paid them really below market rates, and a large amount of fixed costs relating to our buildings that made significant expense reduction without slowing our momentum nearly impossible. Our endowment has been a source of strength for us to support these operating deficits, and the board has been supportive of this approach. In fact, we actually budgeted an operating deficit of $340,000 for this fiscal year that ends in June. Importantly, though, at the beginning of this fiscal year, which began July 1 of last year, we initiated a significant change in our fundraising efforts to shift from governmental grants to individual donors and to increase the donations from our Board of Trustees. We also promoted Karen Pelletier to Chief Operating Officer, which is a new position for us, so Steve Bromage could dedicate more time to fundraising. We reviewed our progress on this after 6 months, so after the end of December of 2019, and the results were very, very impressive. The result of great work by Christina Tracer and the entire advancement team and many of the trustees who facilitated donor meetings. We increased our board giving from $44,000 to $100,000. We increased our overall donor contributions by $85,000. Also, earned revenue from the fine arts storage at Riverside was increasing. Expenses were on track. We were projecting that the deficit for the year would be reduced to $130,000, which is a significant improvement. Our bicentennial event was ready to launch. Our investment strategy had been updated and our endowment was increasing with the market. Then came a cascade of events that we know all too well. The bicentennial launch was postponed. Zoom entered our vocabulary in a new way, and the staff had to rapidly pivot to work from home and lead and execute numerous changes to how MHS operates. Since then, the staff has secured a $235,000 payroll protection program loan, which is a significant amount for us and is expected to be mostly, if not fully, forgivable. In addition, we've applied for other COVID-19 related funding and undertaken or continued other significant fundraising, both increase our storage capacity and virtually eliminate our debt at Riverside. Our endowment has declined, like every institution's, and is down about 5%, including the investment draw, compared to the beginning of 2020 fiscal year. Although reopening the museum and the house is under discussion, they are currently closed, which eliminates the revenue we receive from those sources. The revenue from our parking lot is dried up. Typically, the March to June period is slow for us, so the loss is not significant yet, but the summer will be much slower than we'd like. We have postponed the redesigned Magical History Tour until September, so both the related revenue and expenses will be deferred until next fiscal year, and other expenses, such as those related to programming, have been eliminated. Some grant funding projects have been delayed. The budget process for fiscal 21 has also suffered. As you can imagine, the staff has been actively engaged in more time-sensitive matters as everyone navigates this new world. In January, we plan to have a budget ready for approval today. However, the complications of all the revenue and expense deferrals that I just talked about, adjusting projections for completing this fiscal year and determining their effect for next year are significant, and they change weekly. As a result, management needs more time to develop a meaningful budget. The new timeline envisions some meetings in July and hopefully board approval shortly after that. We all need the extra time to understand the implications of the current situation and our operations and on our budget. My term ends this weekend. I would like to say it's been an honor to have been the treasurer of MHS for the past several years. I want to thank management and the staff at MHS and my fellow trustees, particularly those on the Finance and Investment Committee. The next treasurer will be Drew Swenson. Drew and I go back to the 1980s, and Drew continues to be a leader in the greater Portland area. Thank you all, and I'll take any questions you might have at the end of this meeting. Thank you all very much.
Okay, back over to me for your executive director's report. Boy, I think this is a year that highlights the relevancy of history and both MHS's ability and need to be in the thick of things like few others. We had all anticipated that this year, 2020, the bicentennial of Maine statehood would be a full-bore exploration and celebration of Maine history. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Instead, the world has been turned on its head and we've all been forced to react, respond, and refocus, as we know. Such is life. So I'll start and end my remarks with the bicentennial and weave the remarkable historical moment we are in throughout. When we left you at last year's annual meeting in Orono, Holding Up the Sky had just opened. It turned out to be one of the most remarkable and impactful exhibitions that I believe MHS has ever mounted. The exhibit helped reset the way Maine has approached and understood our bicentennial moment. that it couldn't simply be about statehood, but that we had to consider, integrate, and embrace the experience of the Wabanaki as central to Maine's story and statehood. I think in many ways, the approach, partnership, themes, and dialogues that holding up the sky, that we embraced in Holding Up the Sky may well be the prelude to MHS's approach to responding and making ourselves available to the community in light of the killing of George Floyd and events of the past few weeks. I want to pause and thank Teresa Secord, who is in the room out here somewhere, for her leadership, guidance, and collaboration in developing Holding Up the Sky. Her term on the board has been hugely impactful for this progress we've made in that regard. So building on the success of Holding Up the Sky, MHS was in high gear as we headed into 2020 and towards the big day, March 15th, the actual 200th birthday of statehood. We had just launched a bicentennial education initiative on Maine Memory Network, new lesson plans, extensive content, and a platform that we had developed with Bicentennial Commission for teachers to be able to both upload and share and download other teachers' lesson plans. The bicentennial edition of Ron Banks' Maine Becomes a State was teed up. It was at the printer, and we were prepared to deliver copies to every public and high school library in the state, as well as the legislature. The Magical History Tour was all set and going to feature a great kickoff talk by Earl Shuttleworth and feature bicentennial related states around Greater Portland. We had 3 scholarly forums planned for over the summer and the fall that took on statehood and related topics. And then I think, as hopefully you've all been hearing and appreciated, we were working with Maine Public, and you could hear a daily this day in Maine history, which was a great way to kind of tickle at people every day and for MHS to be out there in a really prominent kind of way. And of course, we had just completed installation of our blockbuster new exhibition, State of Mind, Maine Becomes a State, which explores the separation from Massachusetts, the Missouri Compromise, and how communities perceived and experienced the whole statehood debate. So it were. State of Mind was set to open on March 12th, which was actually the day the first coronavirus case was detected and confirmed in Maine. So the world changed. 200 of you were scheduled to be with us on that day to open the exhibit and kick off MHS's 2020 festivities, 3 days before Maine's actual 200th birthday. The day before the opening, we made the difficult decision to cancel the event and came to the principles and approach that we have adopted and kind of guided our approach during this surreal crisis. One was to determine what was going to be in the best interest of the community as we led. And clearly, even though things hadn't been declared as such, bringing 200 of our members, many of whom are elderly, together was not going to be a good idea. We wanted to try to be proactive and lead, given all of the questions, uncertainty, and the not consistent messaging from above. We wanted to kind of absorb a lot of information and make good decisions ourselves, and also to try to think in as long-term a view as possible. You know, you'll recall initially there was a lot of looking just a couple weeks out ahead. We've tried to look in months increments, understanding that it's going to take a long time for this to play out, and it's not going to look like what it was. We quickly closed, pivoted, and transitioned all staff to working from home and entered the world we're in now. As Carl mentioned, we were fortunate to get a payroll protection loan, and what that has meant that to this point, we've been able to retain all of our staff. As Carl also mentioned, we're hustling. We have a major grant into National Endowment for the Humanities and another one going in this week to the Institute for Museum and Library Services. And those both focus on both keeping humanities and museum staff working through these changes, but also to really help us imagine and plan for what the world is going to look like as we come out of it. I think we all recognize it's going to look different. So we really want to find the opportunities there. As we suggested early, I think there is opportunities to think and work differently in this time. I think as here we are in Zoom, we may all have a little Zoomitis at the moment, but it's incredible how quickly the world has adapted this as a tool to connect, to get content and such. You know, one of our highest strategic priorities as an organization is being truly statewide and being able to serve and reach people who can't get to our campus, which is the vast majority of people who love and care about and live in Maine for the most part. So we see this as a real tool to develop and embrace and to convert, frankly, many of our public programs, and really leading with the Zoom, the online component. So we see great opportunity there. I want to thank Richie Kahn, who's on the call with us, for helping us pilot some of this in our conversations with about putting pandemics in perspective a couple of weeks ago. That was great, Richie. Thank you. And I think you've also seen and heard and maybe contributed to the moment also reaffirms the importance of having historical organizations here to be collecting in these moments. It's been gratifying to have Maine Memory Network in place and to have our My Maine Stories initiative in place, because we could very quickly pivot and launch a COVID-19 collecting initiative, which we have done and is bringing in and will continue to bring in stories and perspectives about what this moment means to Maine people. So opportunity as well as challenge. So just in terms of how we're looking to the months and year ahead, again, we are trying to plan as well as we can, but recognizing that flexibility and adaptability is key to this. Our current plan is we're hoping to open the gallery as of July 1st with lots of safety precautions and social distancing in place. That's a tentative plan. We'll have to see how the month plays out. We are intending to not open the Longfellow House during the summer, July and August. The complexity of trying to keep it clean and safe and move people through there, things like cleaning with alcohol, not good on historical collections. So we're going to just be really cautious there. We'll see where we are again in September, but I think long term, it makes sense for the house to take a little break at the moment. We're also are fairly certain that we're not going to attempt to do any public programming, in-person public programming in the fall. Again, we're going to shift to some really dynamic things via Zoom, but it's just too tentative and we don't know where the public is going to be. So we're going to concentrate on how we can reach people this way. Finally, we are working to reboot the Magical History Tour. There's so much eagerness and enthusiasm, and we had a great program lined up. People are not ready to come back out. I don't think it's safe to do that, and it won't be for a couple of months. But when people are ready, I think we want to be there. And we also think there's some neat opportunities to kind of reconfigure it and reimagine it. So anyway, so that's a kind of big picture view of how COVID is affecting MHS. I want to kind of shift now to, COVID has consumed so much of all of our attention. I want to quickly mention some of the achievements in our normal activities. We completed 2 major collections initiatives that you knew were underway in this year. That is the complete digitization of our Portland Press Herald glass plate negative collection, about 19,000 images, which are now fully digitized and available online, as well as our early photographs of Maine from the 1840s and 50s. You'd heard about that, but we've completed that project. We did 4 small exhibits in our lecture hall related to it. We've also really took on and made vast progress and have completed the costume collection project. What a beautiful example we have on the right here. As you recall, all of those costumes were crammed into a small room at 489 Congress Street. They've all been moved to Riverside, unpacked, cataloged, photographed, rehoused, and are just set up now to survive for the long haul. They will be the focus of one of our next major upcoming exhibits. We're all trying to look at the timing and when you invest in what a physical exhibit looks like, but that will be our next blockbuster. So we're really excited about that. And of course, I mentioned last year at the annual meeting that the redesign of the journal was underway. We have completed that process. You now should have all had that in your hands, and we are just really proud and excited about the direction that's headed. So onward ho. In addition to that, one of our favorite events each year is the Maine History Award, which recognizes Mainers who are making a difference in our community today. We had a wonderful event in November honoring the Hildreth family, twin brothers Horace and Charles. Horace was governor of Maine in the late 40s. His children his and his brother Charles' children ran big businesses, diversified communications, Hadi. They helped lead the environmental movement. We had a wonderful celebration of the family with a couple hundred people in November. And it just really points to the timeliness, I think, of all of this work, as we've lost both Hadi and Charles since then. So I think we feel blessed that we just had that brief opportunity to bring them together and honor the family. Okay, if you want to proceed, we also, you know, right within the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, we also got some wonderful news from the National Endowment of the Humanities, which is a major grant to fully digitize and create an online collections guide for our proprietors' collections. These are some of the most important, heavily used collections that MHS has. They really document the land use and distribution over hundreds of years, and it's really foundational if you want to understand privilege and how Maine has developed and that land has been used. So these will be fully digitized, helping preserve the physical asset, but also all available on Maine Memory with great rich content. So we're really excited about that. That work will be getting going in the next couple of months. So anyway, onward ho with the work of the organization. So just when we all believed that we were in the depths of this national crisis due to the coronavirus, we witnessed the killing of George Floyd 2 weeks ago. I think there are certain moments when the world around you becomes crystal clear. Enough is enough. The groundswell of outrage and courage in communities around the country has been inspiring and suggests we've entered a new moment and had the opportunity to potentially affect real change. MHS is committed to being part of and helping lead the changes that need to be made and supporting our community through the complex challenges and deep, deep emotions that we're seeing today and every day of the last couple of weeks. You likely saw the letter MHS sent to the community this week that Jean mentioned. I've corresponded with 40 people who have written in response. I'd say about 90% of them were extremely positive and appreciative for MHS making those comments. Maybe 5% was critical and didn't think that MHS should be getting involved in that way. I think what this all points to is that the real work begins now. As we talked about at our board meeting last year, though, I think the work we've been doing the last couple of years with 400 years of New Mainers, holding up the sky, really prepares and demonstrates the role that we think we can play. So challenging times, but I think here we go, and we're ready to lean in. We're ready to be leaders in this community. So that's where that is. And we really would welcome your feedback and your conversation with you as we approach this new world we find ourselves in. So I want to go back and close to bring things back to the bicentennial. What, you may ask, will become of Maine's bicentennial in the midst of the tumult in our world? You know, it's almost hard to think about. I think my observation is the state as a whole is largely going to push the state in terms of the official Bicentennial Commission activities are largely going to be pushed back to 2021. Makes a lot of sense as you look at the date and the calendar and the uncertainty. So I think you'll see a lot of activity in 2021 and big events. What MHS is preparing to do is do something more sooner, more concentrated and more focused. We think we put a lot into this. It's an important story. People can, I think about and have that resonate at the same time we're dealing with these changes. The moment hasn't been yet. So what we're planning to do is really to repackage and refocus our efforts probably between September and March. So if you think about it this way, March 15th, 2020 was going to be the kickoff of bicentennial activities. I think the big state event will be March 15th, 2021, and that will be the coda to our activities. So what we're looking at is making holding up the sky state of mind available. Again, there's some sophisticated ways to sell tickets by timed increments to get as many people as safely can into the exhibit. We're also really going to focus again on Zoom programs. There are so many wonderful speakers and conversations that we can promote so much better and more easily here online than trying to bring people from Virginia and California and Boston to Maine to speak to us. So look for that, more information about that to come in the months ahead, in the weeks ahead. So that's where we're going to go. So, okay, with that, I'm going to pivot in the program, and I'm going to end my executive director's report and move on to the next part of the program. Okay, Hillary, if you want to advance the slide. Again, I feel dreadful for having to drone on and for you having to listen to so much of Steve in this way, and we're just going to keep moving. I think the next part of the program, our awards, is really one of our favorite things. There are so many people who contribute to the work that we do, to the endeavor of Maine history, and we honoring their contributions is really, really important. It's also very frustrating because normally I'd be bringing people up on stage, I would be shaking their hands, I would be presenting them, maybe hugging them, and we could all have that moment of applause and appreciation. Zoom makes it very clunky for handing off. So what I'm going to do, you'll get a slide, and I'm going to talk about these contributions. We'll try to move through it as quickly as we can, and then maybe we'll find a way in the discussion period to give some shout outs and point to people and make them blush in that setting. So I'm going to dive in. The first award we're going to present is the Neal Allen History Award. The Neal Woodside Allen Jr. History Award was established in memory of Neal Allen, who was a distinguished historian, teacher, administrator, and president of MHS many years ago. The award recognizes and honors outstanding contributions to the field of Maine history. So this is big history done really well. Since it was instituted in 1992, some of the titans of Maine history have been recognized. Earl Shuttleworth, of course, Neil Rold, Richard Judd, Alan Taylor, and more recently, Lisa Brooks. This year, we are really pleased to present the Allen Award to two scholars from the University of Maine of different generations, to Ronald Banks posthumously, and to Liam Reardon. In this, the year of the bicentennial, Ron and Liam have been and will be keepers, tellers, and analyzers of the statehood story for generations. I hope that'll make sense in a minute. So I want to start with Ron Banks. Yeah, there we go. A native of Camden, Ronald Fillmore Banks graduated from Gorham State College, USM, and got his master's and doctoral degrees from the University of Maine at Orono. He was described, and I love this quote, by a colleague as a small town boy with a vision as wide as the world. It's a beautiful phrase. His enduring legacy to Maine history is his book, Maine Becomes a State, the definitive account of how Maine achieved statehood in 1820, which was published by MHS in 1970 as part of the 150th birthday party of Maine. Drawing primarily from period documents, correspondence, and newspapers, Banks reconstructed the 35-year campaign that resulted in separation from Massachusetts and the formation of the state of Maine. Maine Becomes a State remains the foundational text for all who study that critical moment in Maine history. We were very pleased this year to publish the bicentennial edition of Maine Becomes a State, which I hope you all have purchased multiple copies of and handed on to friends. Banks taught history and spent his career teaching history at the University of Maine. He also served as an advisor on the history of Maine's Indian land claims to Governor Joseph Brennan and to Senator Edmund Muskie. He was working on a book on that subject when he was tragically murdered while attending a history conference in New Orleans in 1979, a real loss to his family and to the state of Maine. Ron is remembered as a gifted scholar, a teacher, and administrator. I'm really, really pleased and moved to acknowledge Ron's 4 children who are with us on this Zoom today, Philip, Kate, Amy, and Nancy. It has been so wonderful to get to know you and interact over the last few weeks. We really appreciate what your father has done and the fact that you're with us today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, I now want to move on to Liam Reardon. Since coming, another scholar of UMaine, since coming to the University of Maine, I think in 1990, University of California and PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. He's a past board member of the Maine Humanities Council, former director of UMaine's McGillicuddy Humanities Center, and currently serves on Bangor's Historic Preservation Commission. He also is very active in Maine National History Day, which many of you know is a great way for students to get involved in practicing and sharing history. At a time now, Liam has been such a and champion of the bicentennial. At a time when the state and the cultural community was really struggling to gain traction in commemorating the bicentennial, Liam tirelessly and effectively reminded everybody around the state that it was time to rally. He reached out and made himself available. Critically, he has masterfully told the story of statehood to audiences throughout Maine again and again and again, giving the bicentennial both this incredible grounding in scholarship, which it needs so badly, but also telling a really fascinating, wonderful story. These efforts really culminated with a wonderful scholarly conference he put on last year, which we had our annual meeting the day after, Maine Statehood and the Bicentennial last May, which was a great and tremendous gathering of historians of various stripes and really shone a light on scholarship of that era. Liam continues to give talks around the state, now via Zoom, and we look forward to featuring him one, if not multiple times in the months and year ahead. So Liam, with that, congratulations. Thank you so much for your collaboration, partnership, and everything you've done for the bicentennial period. I would pause and clap, but I'm a clapper of one at this point, so we'll keep moving. Thank you. The next award we're going to share is the James Phinney Baxter Award, a cash prize given each year for the best article in the journal Maine History. The award is made by a vote of the editorial board of the journal and named for James Phinney Baxter, who was president of MHS for about 30 years, a time when the organization just grew and transformed, and we built our library, for example. This year, we are pleased to present the award to Eben Miller for his article, Beyond Being a War for the Union, This is a War for Civilization, Nelson Dingley's Jr.'s Emancipationist War on Slavery, 1861 to 1863, and it's featured in that first redesigned issue of the journal. Miller's article explores how Dingley championed emancipationist measures on his home front through his work as editor of the Lewiston Daily Evening Journal during the early stages of the Civil War, situating his voice among fellow members, clergy members, soldiers, elected officials, who likewise espoused the necessity of undermining slavery to preserve the Union. The article discusses not only the moral component of emancipationist sentiment, but the economic and political implications, specifically how emancipation would undermine the secessionist rebellion. It's really an incredible article, and as you are safely socially distancing at home, I hope you will reopen your copy of the journal and give it a time. Eben, incredible work. Thank you so much, and congratulations on receiving the award. This is the one prize that has a cash prize that goes with it, so you'll be getting that shortly. Thank you. Okay. The next award we'd like to present is the Elizabeth Ring Service Award. It represents and honors yet another really important character of the Maine Historical Society dynamic, and that's the volunteers who keep this place going. The Elizabeth Ring Service Award recognizing outstanding volunteer service. In remembering the towering contributions of Elizabeth, it honors exceptional dedication, commitment, and effectiveness. Over the past 25 years, it has gone to stellar casts of MHS most devoted friends, including Hannah Russell, Melda Schaefer, and Chris Livesey. This year, we are pleased to present the award to Brenda Steves. Unfortunately, Brenda is caring for a sick, aging parent and is not able to be with us today, unfortunately. Brenda brought 30 years of experience as a librarian archivist when she joined the MHS's Merry Band of Volunteers in 2013. Her career had included time at the State Library of Massachusetts, Fogler Library, and University of Maine, the Dyer Library, and the American Textile History Museum. Her first major assignment at MHS was to catalog our lost small collections. These are small collections that all fit within a single folder that had not successfully moved when we moved our earliest databases to an automated database. These had been lost, so she spent months doing it. Excuse me if I'm distracting. Interestingly, in this moment, I hear bagpipes out on Congress Street, which is adding a whole nother dimension to the atmosphere and environment. Brenda completed that first task in 2015, adding several hundred records to our Minerva catalog. From there, she has continued working with these small collections and over time has processed probably about 2,500 collections. It's an incredible body of work. And by saying processing, this means that when you go on our Minerva database, you can find a wonderful record that tells you the scope and the content and what those collections are really about. So it's really about the accessibility of our collection. So we greatly appreciate Brenda's contribution. Okay, we'll move on to our final award, but today it's a biggie. So the Distinguished Trustee Award was established to recognize the extraordinary service of members of the MHS board. which I cannot say enough about the amount of time, work, generosity, support, and thinking that they give to this organization. It's a critical part of who we are. This year, though, we determined to not honor a single trustee, but to collectively recognize the trustees who are completing their terms on the board this year, which is really an astounding group of change makers. It's going to be nearly impossible to capture their impact in the next couple of minutes, as they've done so much, and they mean a lot to us, but we're just going to dive in and take it from there. So I'd like to start with Carl, from who you just heard from. Now, Carl joined the board with the enthusiast's passion for history and ended up overseeing one of the most important transitions imaginable: the modernization of MHS's finance, which will be the cornerstone for MHS success as we enter our third century. As treasurer and chair of the Finance and Investment Committee, Carl's calm manner, perspective, shrewd accountant's eye, and commitment to MHS's fiscal health and overall success have provided exceptional leadership and the steady hand required to tackle complex and challenging financial issues and to develop the tools needed to build a strong foundation for our future. Carl really leaned in, and it's been an incredible process. Just imagine 200-year-old organizations' finances and getting them where we want them to go. So Carl, thank you so much. Kathy Smith, I'm going to move on to. Having spent her career in the city of Washington, D.C., helping it reimagine what tourism was and the role of its community and the city's identity in tourism, she retired with her husband, Sam, to a family property in Wolf's Neck in Freeport, and how lucky MHS was. I found my partner in crime. Kathy has played an essential role in helping MHS become the organization you know today, one that is focused on, in her words, being useful. Kathy's guiding spirit is reflected in the innovative, fearless exhibitions you have seen in recent years, ranging from 400 Years of New Mainers to Maine Eats to Holding Up the Sky, as well as the redesigned journal Maine History, which was largely inspired by the wonderful journal she helped create at the Historical Society of DC. Through her leadership on the Public Engagement Committee and Executive Committees, as Secretary of the Board, and in the creation of the 2019-2023 Strategic Plan, and her tireless and enthusiastic support for the staff and her efforts to connect the board, Kathy has propelled MHS forward and embodies the spirit of the MHS we are striving to build. Kathy, thank you so, so much for everything, and you're not getting too far away. I'd like to move on to Lee Webb. Now, Lee is a rare breed for MHS, both a PhD historian who brings a researcher's perspective and a career's worth of public finance, political, and fundraising experience. Lee understands that it all starts and builds on the collections. His scholarly work focuses on Maine's political culture and history in the 19th century and draws heavily on MHS and other archival collections. He also recognized that collections are only useful if the organizations that hold them are strong. With that, Lee has provided invaluable leadership on the collections and research and executive committees, oversaw the completion of major collections initiatives, of the redesign of the journal Maine History. And every step along the way, Lee has generously donated time, collections, and his resources to help MHS become a stronger and more impactful institution. He's going to remain on that committee, for which we're deeply appreciative. So Lee, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to Joe Gray, bottom left on your cast of characters. Joe's calm, consistent leadership has been invaluable, including his term as chair of the board from 2017 to 2019. Among other contributions, Joe has helped lead and shepherd the two initiatives that will be recognized as the foundation for MHS third century: the development of our Collections Management Center at Riverside and the development of our current strategic plan. As anyone who's been involved in strategic planning knows, the process includes gathering, wrangling, and appeasing countless voices and perspectives. Joe helped lead the way in that process that was efficient, captured the vision and potential of MHS, and outlines precisely what we need to do next and how we are going to get there. As a former city manager, Joe has also been a tremendous champion for us within the city, making sure that we have a voice, that we're seen and we're know about, and keeping our ear to the ground. So, Joe, thank you so much for all of your contributions. Moving on to Peter Merrill, top center. Peter first helped lead helped lead the charge for MHS' most transformative project of the past decade, the Riverside facility, which I just mentioned. From the first moments we spent crawling through derelict warehouse spaces, Peter understood how essential something as seemingly mundane as storage could be for MHS. It's a life changer. As a former trustee of Portland Public Library, Peter served as a key connector between the organizations who helped establish trust and a deep sense of mutual interest between the organization. There has not been a hiccup in that relationship in the 6, 7, almost 8 years that it has continued. Then Peter shifted his focus to Augusta on MHS's behalf, becoming one of the leaders of Maine's cultural community, serving both as chair of the Maine Cultural Affairs Council and on the executive committee of the Maine Bicentennial Commission. Peter has been a stalwart member of the Finance and Investment Committee and the executive committee. You will always be able to find him, but not this season, behind home plate at Hadlock Field. So I look forward to many meetings doing that with you in the future, Peter. Thank you. He's also going to stay on and help us keep working on our real estate issues and potential. So thank you. I'm going to now move on to Teresa. Teresa Secord has helped MHS embrace and address one of the most important and profoundly neglected aspects of Maine history, 13,000 years of Wabanaki presence and leadership. For an organization like MHS, whose roots lay with the state's founders, this is not an insignificant process or task. Starting with 2015's Baskets of the Dawnland exhibit and culminating with Holding Up the Sky, Teresa's council has helped MHS make bold efforts in its efforts to integrate, interrogate, and celebrate the full dimensions of the Wabanaki experience as essential to everything Maine is today. Teresa helped MHS fundamentally reset the bicentennial conversation in Maine, as I talked about before. In doing so, she has helped MHS make good on our vision for becoming an organization that brings communities and stories together, that is honest, fearless, and humble in confronting the past, and recognize that its core, history and social progress, is a long-term process that isn't fixed overnight. Teresa's personal story, shaped by the experience, influence, spirit, and continued presence of her ancestors, demonstrates how profoundly each of us carries the past. Thank you, Teresa, for what you have brought to MHS and for what you have helped us imagine and see what the bicentennial could be. We're deeply appreciated. Teresa is involved with many organizations and efforts around the state and has really helped systematize, maybe, and institutionalize and make sure this perspective has gotten out there with exhibits at Colby and PMA and other places as well. So thank you, Teresa. I'm going to, now I want to close with my another dear friend, Charles Stanhope, my partner in martinis on Merritt Desert Island. Charles has brought a sprawling Maine experience and world perspective to MHS. Having grown up in a working family on Munjoy Hill, his dad worked for the Portland Company, and he's had his first job as a teen at the Portland Public Library. Charles spent his professional career at the Library of Congress advocating one of the nation's most important archival collections. As part of the Maine diaspora in Washington, D.C., Charles developed a keen sense of what Maine means to expats who are unable to live here. His retirement to Maine was a godsend for MHS. Grounded by place in his Maine roots, Charles understands how we each carry our stories, history, and heritage, and how that binds us together. As a member of the Collections and Research and Institutional Advancement Committees, Charles is one of the great champions of MHS, a leader in our efforts to create a sophisticated advancement program, and a tireless ambassador, always ready to make a call and connect. Many of you have probably been on the other end of one of his phone calls. So, Charles, thank you so much, and here's to being together again soon. Again, I just want to give a profound collective thanks to each of you on all of our MHS's behalfs. As I hope everybody out there knows and sees, it's a time of great ambition and pushing and really fighting for relevance. And these people have made us such a stronger organization. So thank you. We look forward to long, close relationships going forward. So with that, I will pause, catch my breath. And I would be getting much more audience room feedback, but I think we're actually in pretty good shape from a timing perspective and able to close the meeting a little bit early so that we can get on to the better, more important stuff, which is dialogue and conversation. thank you for listening for all of that snapshot. So with that, we're going to conclude the business portion of the meeting. And now we're going to officially and take a couple minutes to transition to Q&A mode. So here's how that's going to work. If you'd like to or need to leave the Zoom now, feel free to do that and go about your day. Thank you for joining us for the annual meeting. If you plan to stay on, we suggest you switch your Zoom to gallery view. That'll let you see and hear from all of the other attendees in the room. We've collected some questions and heard from several folks who would like to be briefly recognized, so I'll work through that. You can still submit questions or comments via the chat section. You can also ask questions by raising your hand, waving. I'll make note of that and try to organize and call on you one at a time. Please do try to avoid speaking over others. We will endeavor to get to everyone. And if you don't get to ask your question or make a point, please just call or email us. This is all challenging, I know, but we're eager to talk with you and to have a phone conversation or answer any questions that you might have. So we're here and look forward to that. I think that's it. So thank you again for being part of MHS and being part of this meeting, and we're going to open it up for conversation now. I think I did hear from one person who I know wanted a moment to speak, and that's Ryan Noyes. Ryan, if you're here and you could wave your hand, that would be great.
Right here.
Oh, hey, Ryan.
Can you hear me?
Easy?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So, Steve, by the way, I got to hand it to you. I have to use Zoom like Monday through Friday all week long, and I think you win as best Zoom facilitator. You're a master at this, and I think your way of facilitating this is extremely impressive, very succinct. You packed a lot in there, and I think your messaging as well was right on point. So thank you for all of that. The reason I requested to speak briefly was in large part because I think organizations like MHS, I can kind of break into, roughly speaking, 4 cohorts. There's the staff. There are volunteers that then have kind of 2 parts. There are those of you who serve as members of the Board of Trustees or in some sort of governance capacity. Or maybe some other sort of ad hoc committee. And then there are the volunteers that do like everything else. And I do think all 3 of those, and then the 4th, I guess, cohort or group would be the rest of us. People like me who don't even live in Maine, love the mission, and really appreciate the work that the other 3 groups are doing to advance the mission. So to the volunteers, I don't know if any are tuned in or listening. I just think it's a nice message to come from just a regular dues paying member from out of state, like maybe like me, just to say, look, you know, I know what you guys do day in, day out to help make this happen, whether it's working in the gift shop or cataloging a one-off project, or you know, whatever the case may be. Just go. I want you to know that you're not forgotten, and it's easy to forget people like you, and there's so many more of you than just one, and I think that's important. And Brenda especially, you know, congratulations to you. I also wanted to say to the staff, you know, I have worked in nonprofits myself, and I know what it's like to be, you know, working in an office on a blustery, you know, Tuesday night to finish a grant proposal or to finish something else that's on deadline, and you're all by yourself, and you're trying to just get to a point where, you know, the lights come on and everyone's happy, and you two are not forgotten and certainly appreciated for all you do behind the scenes in any capacity, even the part-time you know, staff members there that work in the Maine Memory Project or what have you. And finally, I did want to mention to anyone that serves in a governance capacity, whether you're a freshman or you know, you're kind of an old sock and you've been around for a while, I do think it's very important, and I just want to leave you with this sort of words of encouragement. By the way, I have no beef. This is not preempted, certainly not a solicited comment from me, but I think it's an important one, and that is just to remember our mission. with everything we do. I'm a big fan of mission statements that are very short and succinct and easy to remember. And I'm going to sort of, if I may, bastardize a little bit New York's one, because they have a kind of a short sentence, one sentence version. And this would apply to any statewide historical society. So I look at what we do here as being broken down into a mission that is one to collect, to preserve, and to ultimately interpret for the broadest possible public material that is relevant both to U.S. history, but more specifically to everything that was and is this geographic region that we call Maine today. And I just ask that whether you're in a subcommittee or you're in a regular board meeting, that you not lose sight of why we are here. It's easy to make decisions, and by the way, I have no beef, and I have not lifted up the hood, and I'm not angry about anything, but I do know from past experience in a governance capacity that I've seen situations where we can sometimes make choices that we justify by trying to couch in a certain way to adhere to a mission. That would be potentially disingenuous, right? So we have to always focus on what will advance that mission for the greatest possible public good. And to the extent that some of us can try and advance it from afar, know that you have our support. And again, I just thank you for all that you do. And I know that many of you put many, many hours in, and I appreciate that. And I'm sorry I spoke so long.
Thank you so much for that perspective, Ryan. Really, really appreciate it. You know, MHS is nothing if not a community with hundreds and thousands, and hopefully everybody who has a care of Maine we're a home for. And so everybody brings different needs, interests, and perspectives, and it's a really valuable one you share. So thank you. Now I'm going to look across my 3 Zoom screens, and if you have a comment or a question, I'm not in screen 1 of 3. I'm not seeing any waivers. Looking pretty good in Zoom screen 2, not a lot of waivers, and 3. So I'm not seeing questions at the moment. Jean, is there any comment that you'd like to make? Oh, Eileen Skinner.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, comment on the Zoom format. Much like Ryan, I live with Zoom and Skype and Microsoft Teams all week. And as you know, this is my 3rd term on the board, but in the beginning, when I started working in Boston, it was very difficult, as you know, to call in the meetings. The acoustics were limited. People kind of forgot you were there because out of sight, out of mind. And so honestly, you know, I'm sitting in Boston right now because I'm on call this weekend. I'm in the middle of the COVID crisis, and if I had had to drive to Maine, it would have been frankly not possible. So it does have downsides, but it also has upsides. And I really enjoy, frankly, seeing everybody's face. And, you know, it's a different way to connect, and it is limited in some ways, but I think it's enhancing for a state as big as Maine. And then for those of us that work out of state. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. You know, it's funny, we'll be sharing, I hope you're all on our eConnection sign up in our social media. We actually have some really interesting Zoom programs. Again, we've, as I think Carl mentioned, we're a lean staff, but we've really been putting the infrastructure in place for some great public programs over the summer and into the fall. So look for that. In a couple of weeks, we have a great film and discussion panel about Beatrix Ferrand as part of our Olmsted program series. So there's some really good stuff coming up. And, you know, once we're on here, I spend so much of my life holed up in an office now at home, focusing on the mechanics administration, but it's just so wonderful to be out here making eye contact and talking with people and seeing so many friends. Anybody else who wants to wave? Otherwise, I might just start singling out. Oh, Betty Ann Kane. Betty Ann? Can we make sure we unmute her, Hillary? Okay, just bear with us a minute, Betty Ann, and I think our host will unmute you.
Yeah, I unmuted her. Betty Ann, can you try to unmute yourself?
Betty Ann, Yeah, you probably have a button to push to unmute yourself.
Elf,
There you go.
that you're not allowing me to do. Okay. So now, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you. I'm a relatively new member. I've been a member of the society for several years now. But I'm had the privilege of serving with Kathy Smith on the board at the DC Historical Society, which is where our permanent home is. We're in Harpswell more than ever now that I have retired. I just want to thank you for the tribute to her. And also to DSI, as you can tell from my inability to unmute. I've done a lot of Zoom, but not all week. It does work quite well. I think that even though, as others have said, the kind of silver lining of the COVID and the necessity to isolate, and we're quarantining here for 14 days now because we just got here a few days ago, is the ability to reach a lot more people and to keep in touch. There have been so many programs that you were having that I couldn't get to. Either because we were still in DC or because I was taking care of my husband who has health problems, et cetera. I just think isn't going to be a real opportunity to share programs in a much broader way, both within Maine and around the country for those of us who love Maine but can't be here all the time. So I just wanted to say it. I agree that there's this real opportunity to broaden the reach. Something we always struggled with the Historical Society in DC, even though we were all right there within 65 square miles, still reaching people. They too are starting to do more programs online and more interactive programs that I think can be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Betty Ann. It's incredible. I mean, there are so many dimensions of this pandemic and how we're affecting us. And from the places where there are really serious outbreaks and so many people are getting sick and dying and fighting it, and the economic devastation. But yet, then there's us who our routines are changed and we're inconvenienced. But, to your point, there is so much opportunity and there's so many accumulated processes and meetings and ways of doing things. So I do think it's a way to kind of turn the world upside down and think about how do we rethink what we want to do and what's most important and attack it. So, hopefully, along with all the challenges, there will be some reinvigoration in certain ways with this, that MHS and everybody else, I think all kinds of industries are going to refine themselves that way.
Yeah. I think it also underlines and makes even more urgent one of my important professional issues. I was chairman of the Public Utility Commission in the District of Columbia. We did telephone, but the availability of broadband in parts of Maine where it's, even in Harpswell, it's gotten a little better now, but just it underlines, even though it's an opportunity to broaden, it underlines the divide that's there too, and the absolute necessity for public policy, public funding, and other kinds of support to get good quality broadband into every section of the state and into every home.
Thank you for that point too. Not to jump in, but it's interesting. You look at the parallels in the historical transformation that can be made by those public investments. We have the Central Maine Power Collection, and you look back at the electrification of Maine and the investment that was made to lay lines and to create power, and nobody had any idea what exactly it was going to mean or do, but there was no way you couldn't. And, there was transformation into social life, to economy, into industry based on that. And I think the message to your point is you have to lean in and understand that investment is about the future, particularly a place like Maine where we have this incredible quality of life and people can choose to locate here, but they need broadband to work. If you're a rural farmer and you want to figure out where your markets are for your products, there's so many surprising places where that broadband infrastructure comes. So I think I look back to our work, and it's the telling of those stories to inspire civic leadership today, I think is really important. So thank you. Questions? I'm going to scroll back through my screens.
Steve?
Yes.
It's Trustee Atwood. Can I just add something very quickly? I'm a relatively new member of the board, but just did want to offer my sincere thanks and kudos to the staff for putting this all together. This, as much as we would love to have been together in a beautiful place, it's a wonderful adjunct and gives us opportunities to expand our connections a little bit. Also, thank you to the trustees that are terming off for all that all the help that you've lent to me as a rookie on the board. And lastly, and I think he's stepped off now. I was hoping to be able to shout out to a fellow that many of you may know. Charlie Scontris was on the call earlier on, and Charlie is someone that I met when my father and he were colleagues at Williams High School in Oakland, Maine, a school that no longer exists 50 years ago. Charlie is one of the real gems in the state. He saved the mural that Governor LePage had taken out of the Labor Department. And I wish I could have said hello to Charlie in person on this call, but I will certainly reach out to him and sign off from there.
Thanks. I'm going to call on Amy, and then we'll go to Lee Webb. Amy Banks. And I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much. First of all, I just want to say I'm Ron Banks's third child, third of four. The other three were on today. I think most of them have stepped off, as were 4 out of his 5 grandchildren were able to hear, the award being presented to him. And I just want to thank everybody for, being present, awarding this to him. It sometimes feels like when you lose somebody early and young like that, they just sort of disappear in a sense. And, it's always been, my siblings, kind of our passion to keep Maine alive for our family and and to show our kids, what Maine really has meant both to our family, but also to my father, who obviously loved the state. So really special to be here today and see so many people who have been in the field. I also want to mention to folks that my younger sister, Nancy Banks, who's not on right now, is also a historian. She got her PhD from Columbia and has been very much followed in my father's footsteps. So that's been a very kind of interesting development. So thank you very much from our family for the award. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Amy. It's been great to connect with you all.
Yeah.
Lee, did you have a comment?
I just want to join Bob in his shout out for Charlie Scontris, a man I think untrained academically. He's probably written 10 or 12 books on the history of Maine labor. He just finished probably a 500-page book, well into his 80s, on labor history in the last 20 or 30 years. And he's probably documented the history of labor in Maine as well as has been documented in any other state in the Union. Just an enormously productive, dedicated historian. And what's so unusual is a man who really believes in the labor movement and has believed in it all his life and continues to tell its story.
Thank you for that acknowledgement, Lee. I'm going to scroll through and see if I see any waving hands or wagging fingers. And I will also start to make the point for those of you who couldn't get enough of all of this, we've recorded it and we're going to make it available through the website too, so you can go back and listen to favorite parts or the whole thing all over again. I'm not seeing any additional questions or comments, so I think what I'm going to do is, Kathy Smith, my friend. You need to, Kathy, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Since it sounds like you're winding up, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for the kind words that you said about those of us who are leaving. It's been an enormous joy and honor to be part of this great organization. So I hope to continue to be helpful in some way. I'm going to miss seeing you all regularly, but it's been a real pleasure. And also want to shout out to Betty Ann Kane, who's my colleague from Washington, D.C. It's great to see you on here. Great help to me. She was a member of the city council there as well, and a great colleague in doing the history of Washington, D.C. And Steve, thanks to you. This is a challenging time for you and the whole staff. So thanks to what you're doing, and to Jean. I can't see you here, but I know you're there. Thank you for your leadership on the board. And you did a good meeting, despite what you had to do to pull it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll try to get out of here before it goes off the rails. I'm going to do one more quick survey, see if I see anybody. Okay, I think we're approaching free and clear. I'm just, oh, Lee Webb.
I just, am I still unmuted? I think I am.
No, we hear you loud and clear.
I think that we should congratulate our class of trustees who are now dropping off because of the retired term, because one of our first actions was to hire Steve as the executive director. And I think that that was an extremely important decision. And I just want to acknowledge all of us for being so smart, so intelligent, and making such a good decision for hiring Steve.
You're here.
Very
Well said.
kindly. I'm mindful of what you all mean in my life and in my career, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you right back at you. Okay, well, with that, I want to close by turning the thanks back outwards. Thank you so many of you for being part of this. In some way, it almost feels like this is more connecting and democratic than when we're all in a big room and off at different tables. I just love the equal size of our heads and faces and seeing you this way. You know, I've got friends in Boston and in Piscataquis County, and it's just, I'm getting a real kick and rush and appreciation out of seeing you all. So thank you for taking the time. Stay close in touch. Email, call us, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon. And with that, we'll end the meeting. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.